So we are recording today's session just for all of the hosts who are unable to make it, so they will have something to refer back to in terms of some of the questions they may have. But we will get started today. I just want to welcome everybody. One, just thank you for signing up to be a host for On the Table. We're really excited to be doing this for the first time in Racine. And we've got a really great group of hosts this first go around. So we want to do everything we can to make this like the most positive and successful experience for all of your participants and for all of you. So we are going to just kind of kick things off. So first, I just kind of want to get a sense from everybody around how you're feeling about leading your own conversation next week. We've got 7 days to go. You can unmute and share, or you can share in the chat, but just like share with everyone kind of how you're feeling about the event.
Yeah, I'm feeling good about it. It actually is an opportunity to talk more about some of the things that Chief just mentioned, how that partnership came about, and what are we moving forward? How are we moving forward with that? So.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited as well. This kind of format gives me buzz. I love being around people and dealing in the realm of ideas. And so this will be really interesting to have a conversation specific to reentry with some of the RVM staff who do this every week, community people who may have very little idea what reentry is about or how it's negotiated, and guests from the Department of Corrections who deal with this every day on a technical side, and helping to explain some of the technical issues so that folks have a better understanding of what reentry is about and how they can contribute to help people making that reentry more smoothly, whether it's their family or a member of their church, or what's healthy and what's unhealthy in terms of helping people get reintegrated again.
Great conversations. Laura said she's looking forward to it. Marcus is, of course, excited. He's a veteran to this. But yeah, anyone else want to share? Anyone feeling a little nervous?
I'm feeling, because it's my first time, I'm a little nervous about it. I'm sorry. Where's my camera at?
There you go.
I'm nervous about it. However, I'm also excited to have this great conversation, see what we can come up with some solutions. Awesome.
Well, this is what this webinar is all about, is so that hopefully you leave here feeling like you got a sense of what to expect, and you feel confident in leading on the day of. And I see Leanna's comment too, just curious to hear how the conversation will be led by the community that's going to be participating. Thanks for joining us, Marlo. I see you on as well.
Thank you.
Just before we get into the content, I did want to ask one more time, or just once, like what questions you all are coming into the webinar with, so I can make sure that we're focusing on some of your key questions throughout the presentation today. So what are some of any lingering or pressing questions you guys all have that you may want answered by the end of today's webinar? Go ahead, Jim.
It's really the wrap up. I mean, the exciting part is getting together and talking to people. The interesting part is getting the data back to you. How's that going to work?
That is, okay, we will get to that for sure during the presentation. And I see Heather's question too, if we can discuss if this is a live event, and if yes, when and where, because she only sees one date. Yep, we'll get through all of these details within probably just about, we're trying to keep it to 30 minutes max. So any other questions too that you guys have, feel free to just throw them in the chat throughout the presentation, and we can refer back to it and make sure they're all answered before you guys leave. Okay, so a quick review of the agenda for today's webinar. We're gonna go over just a little bit of what is on the table, what the event is about. We'll get into some planning steps for planning your specific individual tables, some guidelines, some do's and don'ts to conversations and facilitating, and then just kind of run through what a sample agenda looks like from start to finish. And then we'll just open it up for questions and see if there's anything we may have missed at that point. So we want to devote more of the time today to your questions. So we're going to start first with a clip of On the Table in Chicago, which is where it was started. And so you can get a sense visually of what this looks like in other communities. I'm going to turn the volume down because it always starts too loud. Sorry.
By title is one thing, but who we all are by title is one thing, but who we all are sitting around these tables, and the fact that we all got in our cars this morning and endured the rainy, messy traffic, and we were all here to be a part of this day, and there are 50,000 people around Chicago doing the same thing and working toward the same mission. I am really confident that some of the best change that's going to come in Chicago is going to come through all of us.
What can we do to improve, not just Inglewood community, not just Chicago, but what can we do to improve ourselves?
You don't have to abandon your traditions or your roots by exploring the traditions of others.
I think that there's been so much work to kind of really sell these issues as intractable problems that you need $1 million analysis to, study and to come up with very complex solutions where ultimately people need to go to school and to work and to live somewhere, right?
Perception of what constitutes positivity in a community versus what's actually good for the neighborhood. Investing in jobs, investing in the people that are already there, and how an individual in and of themselves is an asset to their community. So even just one person being displaced is a huge loss.
When you start to see as a us and a them, then it's not really a community.
You don't know the history of a neighborhood or the history of a person. Like, how can you even begin to start to care for that person or care for that neighborhood until you understand the dynamics that make it the way that it was and make that person the way that they are?
If each one of us can come up with a small solution, then I think we can bring about real change.
So that is just a quick clip that Chicago Community Trust put together in 2016 for their On the Table. At that point, they had already been doing On the Table for, at least 5 years. So they've been able to grow it to be a much larger event throughout the city there. And here in Racine, as you all know, we launched Racine Speaks, Real Data, Real People in July of this year. And that report focused on the 4 key topics of education, economy, health, and justice here in Racine County. And the big piece, the main piece of this report was really about going out into the community and listening to community members who represented the data. And so we wanted to hear directly from them around what are their ideas, what are their solutions for some of the longstanding community issues. And so Marcus, being in Milwaukee for a number of years, Milwaukee's done this extensively. He decided to bring the idea of On the Table to Racine. And so our next step from Racine Speaks, rather than us going out into the community and doing a series of conversations, was to equip local leaders and community members to lead their own. And so that is where we are today in terms of being 7 days away from launching this event for the first time. So a little bit about On the Table. The main premise of this event is to bring small groups of people together around a meal of some kind to talk about an issue in the community that matters in your life or to your organization or in your neighborhood. It's in the same spirit, of course, on the table Racine. What we're hoping to do as a foundation is to encourage healthy dialogue, foster connected community, and spark collaborative action. So we really want people to leave their tables feeling like they were a part of something great that day, like they had a really positive experience, that they feel like they met someone new. They don't feel so alone in some of their thoughts, and kind of thinking through how they can be involved in next steps and taking change to make, taking action to make change. Any questions so far about kind of why on the table and how we got here? Jump in at any time. So we wanted to do a quick Zoom poll in terms of planning your conversation and your tables. We are just trying to get a sense of which planning steps you've already completed. So feel free, Ashley just put up the poll. It's multiple choice to select all the things that you have done so far already. And if you haven't done any yet, no problem at all. And just, we want to get a sense of like where some planning steps that need some attention we can focus on today. Do you have a good amount of responses, actually?
Yep, I'm gonna end the poll now, unless anyone waves at me to stop. Okay, I'm gonna end it and share it. Can you guys see that?
Okay, most of you have registered, awesome. Got your topic, got your meeting in place, figured out, and about half of you have invited your guests. So I do see that planning the meal and working on the guest list and inviting the guests may be where we kind of spend a little bit more time. So that is very helpful to us. Thank you. Okay, so just walking through the 7 steps to planning your conversation. If you haven't already, please register to be a host. That is how we're going to be tracking who we're sending the follow-up surveys to, because we want an accurate report out after the event. And I will share that link in the chat, or Megan, if you can share the link to register as a host in the chat, thank you. That'd be really helpful. So if you haven't yet, do that. Next, and what we typically see people kind of starting to get some energy around is what they want to bring people together about. So considering your topic, if you haven't figured it out yet, it could be something that you organizationally are working on, an initiative you're working on, something you want to test with a group of people. It could also be an internal meeting within your organization. But we really want you to utilize the conversation in a way that's helpful to you and your work or your personal values. So in terms of thinking of your topic, that should be helpful. Choosing a time and place. I always say, think about who you may be inviting and when they may be most available, but of course, working around your own schedule. In terms of place, it could happen anywhere in the community. We do have some hosts who are going to be bringing people together in their homes, which we think is really awesome. But there's also people using some of our great community resources, some of our local coffee shops and libraries and things like that, or their own office space. Planning your meal. So this is where I think some people maybe are going to be focusing on this in the next few days. Has there anyone who's already planned their meal? Do you have, do you want to share a little bit about what you're going to be doing for your conversation? You can unmute.
We're keeping it simple at RVM. We're gonna probably do Jimmy John. We've already talked about what we're gonna get. We want to keep the focus on the conversation and not the meal. Maybe on another time focusing on the meal, but I've done a number of these, and if the meal gets too extensive, the conversation gets shrunk. You know, if you're doing pasta and you're going back and forth, it can get awkward. The other side of that, though, is if you do that kind of a meal, maybe the conversation is not as long, but it can possibly be deeper. Eating together is a pretty profound activity if you thought that through.
Yep. You can't go wrong with sandwiches.
No.
So at
I
our
don't know if yeah, go
our
ahead.
USD, we're doing, the topic will be safety. And so, you know, that's top of mind for a lot of folks. And so we want to address that, and we're going to be feeding pizza.
Also can't go wrong with that. But pizza from where, Dr. Gallion? That's the test.
In casinos.
Okay, that's my spot. Get a gold star for that. So yeah, you can cater a meal like Jim or Dr. Gallion. Some people who are inviting folks to their homes, they're cooking the meal for their small group, perfectly fine. What you can also do is tell everyone to bring their own lunch or bring their own bag. They can bring their own snacks for the conversation. You could also do picnic style, potluck style, have everyone bringing something to share. So the meal is central to the event. So we absolutely do want everyone to have some sort of plan for how everyone's going to be eating that day for your conversation. But it doesn't need to be expensive, extensive, or any of that. So keep that in mind. Any other questions around the meals? So in terms of inviting your guests, we did get a few questions about this by email too. So just as a reminder, the tables are small. There's a recommendation of between 6 to 12 individuals per table. So these are small, intimate conversations. And when we are thinking about who to invite, I think you always want to think about, okay, what's your topic first? Are there some key players or stakeholders you want to bring together? But then also, who are some voices that you haven't heard from around your topic that you really want to share in this discussion? And another idea too is, because we would really love to hear that people are meeting new people too that day. So one idea me and Ashley have been sharing is invite 6 people and have them bring a friend. People feel sometimes a lot more comfortable if they're able to bring someone with them that they know. And so saying, hey, I've invited 6 of you. We really want you to bring a friend or a colleague with you to this conversation. And then that expands your table to 12 and everyone's meeting someone new that day and having robust conversation. Any questions around like any hiccups, uncertainties, any brainstorming you want to do around who you're inviting?
I would just share, Danielle, that I was impressed at how quickly people responded when I sent out my invitations. So we send them out, we're focusing on small businesses, and they were very quick to respond, and we very quickly filled up our table.
Awesome. Love to hear that.
We worked real hard to get a diversity of people in terms of their connection to reentry. So we worked real hard to get participants, people from corrections, people from Racine Unified, people from, to deal with the family issues of reentry and how it affects children, as well as how it affects the person coming in, and how it affects people who have their jobs in this area, like from corrections or social service agencies.
Yeah, great ways to do it too. I know there was one person who, I keep thinking of her as like the first example. She decided to invite 10 of her neighbors. So she went door to door, inviting them to her home for the conversation. I think that's like, there's a scale, right, of like how comfortable people are going that far, but it's all about who you're trying to bring together. And she specifically wanted some folks from her neighborhood. So that's one way. Sending out an email and saying, hey, we got 12 slots. That's another way, because it kind of creates like oh, I have to sign up. What is this, right? And then also the way Jim talked about is like in a collaborative sense, like we're going to have someone representing all these different areas. We would really love to have you there. So these are some great ideas. Thanks for sharing. Anything else around any of these 7 steps that any of you have questions on right now or would like us to dig into or ask everyone else how they're going about some of their planning?
Well, this is Marlo. I appreciate the feedback on the meal suggestions. That was something that I had questions on. And I do agree with the statement with regards to there seems to have been a quick response to when I sent out invitations on my subject, which is the collaboration of individuals as elected officials on school board, city council, county board, and then other elected positions such as judges, sheriff, police office, departments, and things like that. So have gotten really good feedback on how we can support those type of individuals and bring policies together that are beneficial to overall Racine. So I'm looking forward to next Tuesday, individuals in Racine coming together and collaborating on how we can work together to make some valuable steps in our community.
Thank you for sharing, Marlo. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, it's all about being intentional and strategic. Like who's needs to be a part of the conversation, who are some voices that are missing from the conversation or topic that you want to make sure are there. So if anyone has any other questions about that over the next week, please feel free to reach out to me. So just some conversational guidelines. There are some do's we want everyone to be focusing on as hosts of the conversation. Again, like we've left a lot of the planning all up to you all. And so on the day of the event, you all are going to be the facilitators of your conversations. So just some things to keep in mind, we'll go through in a second, but I wanted to just ask everybody to think back to a really great meeting that you all attended or participated in, and think about what made that conversation great or go well, and share with everybody, what was the one or two things that made that experience positive for you.
You can put it in the chat too.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Dr. Gannon.
I think what works well for me in these types of conversations is that it is beyond the traditional Q&A. It's really about conversation. And so you're allowing the participants to speak and just listen and try not to respond to everything. Just take it all in.
Really, really great point. Anyone else want to share like a great conversation they were a part of and what made it a positive experience for you?
Well, for me, when it's small groups like this, the candid conversation is what's important, because you can literally take off the gloves and really have a conversation respectfully. Whether you disagree or agree, you can have a conversation and you get great takeaways, especially when you're not used to having those conversations with those particular individuals.
Danielle, I'll share as well. I had 2 previous experiences where, I've had obviously a million meetings as chief, but the 2 that stand out for me, one was I was board chair at Halo, and I had a group of board members at my house for a meal. So I've done that twice, like in the last 30 years, and I plan to do it this time. It's just something about like being at home that changes the atmosphere. And it's not to say that you can't accomplish things in public, but the 2 experiences that I had at home were just like more intimate. And so food obviously changes everything, but when it's in your own space, it's almost like you're allowing people to see a part of you that they normally don't see, which kind of opens up a whole nother level of conversation.
Yeah, when they see all your band gear, I'm sure everything changes. Everyone just wants to start booking you for things, right?
Yeah, well, there's that too. Yeah, yeah.
We'll go to Jim, and then I see your hand, Leanna. We'll get to you.
Yeah, I want to go to Art's house and see what books are in his bookshelf. That's always one of the more fascinating aspects of visiting somebody in their home. But I want to reiterate what Dr. Gallion said. Boy, that's for a facilitator, that is magic, not responding to everything. It really keeps the conversation moving. I will keep that in my head, Dr. Gallion, as I do my meeting. Thanks for bringing that up. And the other side really is just getting everybody involved, which is not easy to do. If you have someone like me in the room who wants to respond to every question a half a second after it was stated, you got to manage the conversation. So the icebreaker can kind of set that up, that everybody gets involved. But as a facilitator, you got to make sure you're getting everybody involved, especially the introverts and the folks who process a little longer. You got to kind of make sure that they have a space to speak.
Leanna?
So I have been in multiple conversations, multiple spaces where I was a participant and I was also a facilitator. And I think active listening is probably the biggest thing that has helped every single one of those conversations I've been a part of, where you're just letting someone just express themselves, let it all out, and you just give them your full attention, no interruptions. So that's very similar to what a few other people had said. Also just kind of removing barriers for people, making sure the space is comfortable for them has always been like a big help in those kind of spaces. Just want to flip that up.
Thank you for sharing, all of you. So just really quickly, you guys touched on some of these, but yes, making sure all participants are able to share their thoughts and ideas. We want everyone to feel like they were able to share and were heard during your conversation. Listen for differing viewpoints and experiences. When someone doesn't agree on something, it's not a point in the conversation to avoid. It's an opportunity to kind of have everyone share and contribute at that point. Focus on generating solutions. So as much as we want everyone to kind of get comfortable, get into the flow of the conversation, we also want to make sure all hosts are shifting to generation of solutions and ideas by the end of their conversation. And next steps, right? So we want some outcome to come from these conversations. And then to, of course, be social. We would really love if everyone could make sure you're taking some photos or a group photo with your group that day or some video, and you can share that on social media and you can tag us in that. So hashtag OTT Racine, I'll follow up with all of this information too, so that you guys have it. And of course, contact me if you have any questions over this next week leading up to your event, because I want to make sure you all feel really good about your planning. Any other do's to consider before we move on to don'ts? Yeah, you guys knew don'ts were coming. the not do's, okay. So similar to the do's, I'm interested in hearing from everybody about conversation that you attended that maybe didn't go well, or didn't go as smoothly, or didn't have an outcome that you hoped for. And what were some of those things that created that environment in that conversation? Go ahead, Leanna.
So I was a part of a conversation several years ago where they were not really respectful with their questions. When asking them, it was very difficult to have an authentic conversation when the questions were the topics were not really respectful of who I was as a community member, as a parent. So I think that was a big don't to do in the future. I definitely learned from their mistakes of just not really respecting people's limits and comforts.
Great point. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else have any don'ts in a conversation?
I can add that I think a big don't is having one individual take over the conversation and not stopping that from happening. You know, being able to manage the the conversation so that everyone, as we said, from a do perspective, right?
Mhm,
The don't is to not have one person dictate or take over that conversation.
Absolutely.
I think that's also true for the facilitator. You know, it can be easy to get preachy if you know your topic really well, to kind of dominate the conversation or direct the conversation and not let it kind of organically grow where you get new ideas and create a space where people really want to contribute.
Yeah, we know that the topics the hosts choose are issues they're passionate about. So yeah, these are great things to keep in mind. So we'll go through a few of our don'ts. So one is to make sure you're not micromanaging the conversation and letting it flow freely. So again, that's more like making sure you're providing the opening questions, you're providing some questions to really get a little bit deeper, and then you're wrapping it up. But yes, so make sure you're letting the conversation flow freely with all of your participants. Another thing to avoid, of course, is to be dismissive of anyone's ideas or thoughts or experiences. Everyone has different experiences, sometimes on the same topics here in our community. And so just make sure you're acknowledging the lived experience of everyone as different. And then also make sure you're not promoting argument or unproductive debate. I know you guys have got to this point a little bit about making sure you're not kind of responding to everything. But also if you see an argument happening or a debate starting, that you're not adding to it. We'll go over on the next slide a little bit on how to diffuse that. And also don't be afraid to ask us questions. I know I say that a lot, but you guys know I'm a email, phone call, text away. So to diffuse an argument, I definitely made sure I was reading some articles on what is the best way to approach this. So the first thing that we're recommending is that you just kind of stop and take a breath. Because when we know when things are ramping up, emotions are kind of starting to ramp up as well. And so our recommendation is just to interject when there's an argument beginning and kind of just making sure make sure everyone feels heard. So you're kind of reiterating to them and mirroring back to them is what it's called. Like, what I'm hearing you say is X, Y, Z. So then they feel like, okay, like they actually do understand me. So that shows you care and that you understand. If it's starting to kind of just get a little bit out of your control, you can also just say like, hey, we're going to take a 2 to 3 minute break, grab a snack, grab some more water or something to drink, and we'll come back together in a minute or two. So that just kind of allows people to cool off a little bit and maybe speak privately or just kind of get a new perspective. So we have some more ideas here. There's a lot more in the toolkit too that we'll resend to everybody. But I just wanted to make sure we go through this to make sure that I know I have a hard time with interjecting when two people are kind of ramping up a little bit, but it is the facilitator's role to make sure you're stepping in and kind of curbing that before it gets too big, I guess. Have any other don'ts you want to share before we move on? So just really quickly, sample conversation agenda. Again, we'll send this to everybody. The key pieces of the conversation are just first making sure you're welcoming everyone to the conversation, thanking them for attending and being a part of your table. Also going over the purpose of your conversation. So that's just kind of saying, here's the topic, here's why we chose it, why you were invited. And then centering and introductions. Some people kind of like to say, ask everyone to just kind of pause, clear their minds, close their eyes, take a breath. That's kind of what we mean by centering. And then, of course, to go around the room and do introductions, because there may be some folks who don't know one another. And then before you get into the conversation, to set some ground rules. And these could be just 3 simple ground rules or conversation agreements, such as we're not going to talk over one another. Something like that. You can share that ahead of time with your group. You can do it with your group at the beginning of your conversation. And then, yeah, so opening the conversation. If you don't know how to open according to your topic, we've been directing people to use our Racine Speaks report. that kind of covers a breadth of information around education, economy, housing, safety, all of these things. And so if you want to start there by saying, hey, if anyone's looked at this report, we shared it ahead of time, what were your reactions to the housing portion? And that's kind of like a way to open it up. And then of course the toolkit also has like a list of, here are some questions you can open up the conversation with. Like what is where our conversation is education. What do you think is the main thing our community needs at this time, as an example. So once the conversation gets going, you've got everyone kind of relaxed a little bit, then you can start deepening the conversation. Once people start sharing experiences and ideas, and you can kind of start shifting towards the solutions piece is what we mean by deepening it. So kind of saying, okay, we talked a little bit about the issue, everyone's experiences. What do you think we need for change to begin? That's kind of the point of switching it over to focusing on solutions and ideas. So then there's a list of those kinds of questions as well in the toolkit, but it's really just kind of asking people like, all right, what do you think a group of 10 people could do on this issue? Kind of getting to something like that. And then when you close the conversation. So once you kind of start wrapping up, nearing the end, thank everyone for attending, and then talk through any next steps people discuss. So if anyone's like, oh, I want 5 of us to continue meeting, make sure you're kind of reiterating to people, okay, I heard that there's going to be 4 people who are going to meet again next week. That's awesome. And then just make sure everyone's exchanged contact information if they're interested, and make sure you take a group photo if you didn't take any photos throughout the conversation. So those are really just the wrapping up pieces. But yeah, it's mostly just thanking everyone for attending and making sure any next steps have been identified for the group. Any questions on the sample conversation? Okay, last slide here. So after your conversation, there's 3 quick steps we're going to be asking all hosts to do. One is to fill out the host survey. So I know, James, you mentioned kind of wanting to understand the reporting. So we'll be sending out a host survey. The main elements of this are just going to be around, okay, how many people showed up and attended your conversation? What was the topic that you all talked about? We know that you can have an idea in mind what you're going to talk about, and that may shift halfway through the conversation. So we want to just kind of get a sense of where the conversation led. And then also just what the outcomes were. So that's the host survey will be pretty simple. And then after you complete the host survey, make sure that you're sharing on social media or with us the group photos that you guys were taking. We'd love to kind of repost and share everyone's involvement in the event, and follow up with your guests if there were any next steps. So making sure that the follow through happens afterwards. So that is all. And then you're done. And then you led a successful conversation. Everyone's leaving feeling like they've made new friends, or want to follow up, maybe over coffee to talk a little bit more. And that's really what this is about, is just making people feel more connected and trying to see what new ideas come from it. So, were there any questions that we missed that anyone wanted answered today? I see your question, Jim, examples of next steps. So from your conversation, like I kind of gave like, okay, say your conversation's housing. There's a group of people who kind of want to reach out to a housing authority to get a sense of like what the need is and where volunteers can help, right? So then the next step would be like, all right, as Jim, I'm going to reach out. I'll let you kind of know maybe whose contact information to reach out to so you guys can do that follow-up. So that's kind of like one idea or example. But yeah, any other questions that were not answered today that you feel you'd like to leave with a clear understanding on? Okay, Dr. Gallion, so if you had to change your time and location, do you need to tell us? So it would be helpful to let us know, just in case any of your participants reach out to us, if they're confused where to go, so then we can direct them to the appropriate spot. But yes, make sure that you're communicating with your participants, any changes that you're making. Yes, and you can send that to us by email. Mhm.
I also wanted to note, Danielle, that the host survey, the answers we get, we don't plan to directly attribute, you know, this is what so-and-so's conversation, you know, discussed and are the next steps without your permission. If there's something that we're like, oh, wow, we really want to highlight this to inspire more people or to get more energy around it, we would reach out to get your permission. Is that right, Danielle?
Yep. Absolutely. Good point. Thanks, Ashley. Great question, James. So on the table is our follow-up to Racine Speaks, as you all know. Our hope, of course, is to do a sort of report out after all of this around here's all the topics, all the tables talked about, here's all the ideas and solutions that were generated, and here's some next steps our community members are taking. So that would be like a report out we do. I mean, if it goes really well, there may be an opportunity to do it again in the future, but we kind of just want to see how this launch goes, of course, and then kind of determine from there. But yeah, from here, we'll be moving on to some of our own internal strategic planning or strategizing internally here at the foundation. So, but yeah, we hope that the momentum in the community continues, right, based on your small group conversations and the folks you've brought together.
And we'll likely ask that on the survey too, and would love to hear from you about whether or not you think it's a valuable investment, one that should continue.
Any other questions? Was there anything we missed in terms of making sure you have all of your questions answered? I know Heather asked what some of the topics were from the last on the table. We haven't done it in Racine before, so this will be our first time getting a sense of what topics come up. But I think in other communities, some of the top areas are the same. We've seen some of the reporting from Chicago and Milwaukee after the event. Conversations typically center around education and community development or housing and things like that, some big topics. But there are always some one-offs that are unique. And that's really what, we're interested in all of that, so.
Marcus, you want to give any other examples?
Well, I think, Danielle had some good ones there, that those kind of more, as we say, kitchen table issues are often the topic, but there are one-off topics that may even lead to more. I'll give you one example there, but an interesting thing we saw the first time we did this in Milwaukee was, and that was sponsored by the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, covering a 4-county area. And even without suggesting topics, in the follow-up survey, we asked if matters of racial equity came up at their table, and half the tables said yes. And so I think even regardless of topic, that ended up being something of a sub-theme at a lot of tables. And so that was interesting to learn later. The example I give a lot is with the Milwaukee Bucks. And we had done some work with the Milwaukee Bucks. So when On the Table came around, we lobbied them to host a conversation. They agreed to do that at their offices. And they partnered with a youth soccer program called America Scores. And they learned in that conversation that a lot of the volunteer coaches felt ill-equipped to deal with the trauma that some of their young athletes had experienced and were bringing to the field with them. That came up, and it was such a pronounced theme in their conversation that the Bucks ended up developing a curriculum to help volunteer coaches know where to turn. And they then conducted trainings around the state, all because of an an on the table conversation, and B, a sub theme that they weren't anticipating at all. So it's interesting that different things will come up.
And I know Heather asked about the event and just wanted some clarity on the date. So yes, so all of the conversations, all the hosts are leading are all happening on October 18th, all on one date at different places throughout the community at different times with different people. And it's not a live event, so there's no one location. This is going to be being filmed or be kind of presented. This will be kind of everyone's kind of determining themselves, the photos they're taking, if they want to do video or not, if your participants are comfortable. We do recommend you ask and just make sure everyone's comfortable with those photos. So hope that provides some clarity. It's all that we have. Any last final questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you all for participating in the webinar. I hope you feel like you've got all your questions answered. And if not, you absolutely know how to reach us because we'll be following up with you. You'll have all of our contact information.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Thanks. This is
Thank
really
you.
helpful.
Thank you.